Hi, I'm Tony Russo, and this is Funeral Service Insider from Kates-Boylston, featuring conversations about emerging trends and news affecting death care from the perspective of people who understand the delicate balance of change in a profession and vocation steeped in tradition. This week, we're speaking with Jon O'Hara. He's the CEO of the Great Lakes family of companies, but more important, and why we're talking to him today, is he was also the brains and brawn behind the movement to change a Michigan law that nearly ended Preneed insurance in that state. He talks about his odyssey and paints a pretty compelling picture about the amount of collaboration it takes to get one simple law passed amidst the state house that's essentially at war with itself. There's big backstory, and it's breaking news as we've never covered it before. This just happened a couple of days ago as I record this, and I'm really excited. I was really excited to talk to him. We ran an original story about this in December of 2022, and back then it was a slam dunk, and it was a story about how this slam dunk was going to get slam dunked in January of 2023, and here it is, November of 2023, and the law has just squeaked by. And he'll tell you that whole story. It's a great story. Remember to stay on after the credits for the postmortem, where we're going to talk about why we're not talking about Colorado. But for now, here's Jon O'Hara. So welcome to Funeral Service Insider, the podcast. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much, Tony. It's glad to be with you today.
So what I would like to do for the people who haven't been following this very closely is get a little bit of background on the story where you guys almost ran out of insurance people to have. This time last year, probably in December, was when you started to work on getting these laws changed.
Yeah, to kind of bring some framework around this. And again, thanks for the opportunity to come on today to kind of share our story in the great state of Michigan. But this all really started in the January of 2022 is when carriers started to really start paying attention to Michigan as it related to the pre-need insurance products because of the regulations that we had here in the state, which forced insurance carriers to be regulated by growth, according to the Michigan, Detroit, Ann Arbor CPI. And this was a similar law regulation that was in place in Virginia. And for years and decades, this has prevented and forced the exit and mass exodus of insurance carriers here in the state of Michigan.
And just for a moment, you guys were the last two, right? Virginia and Michigan were the last two that had this regulation.
That's correct. And I saw the writing on the wall of what was happening and what the long-term effects that this could have on our profession, a profession within the profession, right? So at-need and pre-need and those two worlds are very close. And I knew that I needed to get information on how the law changed in Virginia and how they were able to do that. And so I was gracious enough to be connected with a gentleman by the name of Jimmy Altmeyer, who owns a much larger business than I do and has much more insight on this profession. And so I was gracious enough to earn a half hour of his time and talk about what he was able to put together in Virginia. Michigan's a different state with different dynamics. And I was able to kind of take his playbook, and I'm, again, forever grateful for that, and apply it to what made a whole lot of sense here in Michigan. And I say and this was a full effort among our partners, and customers, and then of course, even our competitors.
I was going to say it was also like everyone was kind of working together to get this done.
Yeah, and I'll even say specifically Tyler Anderson and the folks at Precoa, who again are a competitor, and they are nationwide, and they have a lot of great funeral home partners in Michigan. We all, particularly ourselves and Precoa and the state association, and others, the insurance carriers, all really band together. What Jimmy made clear is that it has to be a local voice that brings this to the table. So with all the help that we received and the support, we did find it was critical to have that local voice to work with legislators, the lobbyists. I quickly had to register as a lobbyist, which was a first for me.
I'm sorry. I just actually took a cheap shot at lobbyists in my editorial last week or the week before. What does it take to register as a lobbyist? And what's the difference between you doing it as just a concerned citizen and you doing it as a lobbyist?
Well, I don't know that there's much other than the relationships, much like sales and anything that we do in life. It's about a lot of times the relationships that exist in wherever your governing body is, if that's Lansing, Michigan, or if that's Columbus, Ohio. Although I'm a Michigan fan, so I should probably say keep that under wraps.
Right.
So, these laws matter in the states. And what I really learned is, again, this started in January of 22. And there was a first draft of this legislation that we've made it all the way through to the governor's desk. And it was a House bill in 2022. And they're let politics be politics. And so goes Lansing, as we say here in Michigan now. That bill was vetoed in 2022 with overwhelming support on both sides of the aisle. But we got caught in the crossfire, which was very disappointing.
Well, was it part of a larger bill?
It was not part of a larger bill. It was part of a larger political environment that was not conducive to, let Lansing be Lansing. And nothing is guaranteed until that signature exists. And so we had to go right back to work in 23. And, bills usually do take a couple cycles. And in the political environment today, it's pretty safe to say the situation we have in Washington, it doesn't not just exist there. So navigating these political environments that I was very unfamiliar with, but had to learn very quickly and make this really small issue on a state level, but a big issue for our profession. And I always said along the way when I was meeting legislators, look, a lot of people don't think about the need that a funeral director or funeral professional or an advanced funeral planner, what the role they have in your life until you really need them. And we need these people to be available to all your constituents. And so that the message didn't change, and the politics were, just as kind of hostile, if you even want to say those words, this year as last. And we had a Democratic sponsor this year with Senator Hertel, who was actually in my representative in the business district. So, it flopped from a Republican bill and then went to a Democratic bill. And we were fortunate enough to just kind of keep consistent, pressure or influence and advocacy along the way to make sure we got this passed this year, because we were in for, formidable danger of losing Preneed for good at the end of 2023 this year. So we were fortunate enough to have immediate effect attached to the bill in the House, and it was I'm confusing all my government terms.
Right.
It was concurred by the Senate, and then the governor, as of yesterday, 3 weeks ago, signed it into immediate effect. So it has been a journey. Again, I was talking to our lobbyists, and back to your original question, it doesn't take much to register lobbyists. It's a fee and a form, and then there's rules that basically you have to follow. Like, you can't be on the Senate floor during session, and that's why they call it the lobbyist, right? Because you're in the lobby waiting.
Right.
The relationships that exist. We had a fantastic lobby team, the best in Lansing, and I can assure you, without that type of representation, along with our expertise in the profession, those two things working together, and of course the determination of getting this done, and just really the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right?
Yeah.
And
but also, I'm sorry, but you could have hired, not could have, I'm not, you could have hired a lobbyist, but that would have been, A, expensive, and then B, to the other point, seem more like from the outside than from the inside. Is that why you chose to do the lobbying yourself?
Well, to be clear, I did have to register as a lobbyist, but we did hire a lobbyist firm to help us with the efforts, because it does, again, back to the original point of it does boil down to relationships. And I'm just a funeral director, owner of a small business that supports funeral homes on their pre-planning and at-need marketing. And these lobbyists have deep roots in relationships. So we had to absolutely hire a lobbyist, and that absolutely did cost money.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I know he said I took a cheap shot at lobbyists. So that's not 100% true. But the case of it was, in order to get some of this stuff passed, you have to have someone who knows what they're doing. And, and today that means that you need a lobbyist. Just calling your congressman isn't always sufficient.
I think, a lot of times funeral service issues can be, kitchen table issues for people. So that's the good news. And I think there's definitely more work to be done. And I'm excited about that work, if that makes sense, to be able to, things evolve, right? I mean, cremation laws, you have different insurance laws that make sense and some don't. And you have licensing laws for pre-arrangement counselors in other states that are, sometimes don't make sense. So, I think it's important that when people approach these things to, get feedback, if there's a lot of grumblings in your state with these laws that don't make sense. What I found is maybe you don't have the energy or the time. But if you band together and there's that person that is willing to do the work, and partner with somebody that's willing to help you with the work from the lobbying perspective, things can get done. Things can absolutely get done. And as long as you're willing to put in a little bit of, not a little bit, quite a bit of time, and you're willing to see it through. And again, a lot of our issues in funeral service are not really that controversial. So, and a lot of them can be looked at to be reworked to benefit not only the consumer, the families we're serving, the funeral homes. And this one did just that, right? It all parties and stakeholders benefited from this legislative initiative. So, and a lot of those situations exist in other states. It's just, where do we start? So I always say, pay the dues forward. And if anybody ever had questions on how to go about that, that's my promise, is that I will take as many calls as it requires to pass along what Jamie was able to pass along to me. So
I wanted to ask also, and I've gotten, just in case they're listening, yes, I've gotten all of the press releases. NGL was one of the only companies that was able to stay, or that chose to stay, however you put it. What has the last year been like with just kind of that single choice, and has it done anything to the rates for consumers? And are those rates I'm sorry to ask a third question in one. And do those rates get adjusted, or how does that all work now that people can come back into the state?
Well, I think I can't certainly speak for NGL. They've been a formidable partner for not only us, but the state of Michigan. And they have a lot of clients in Michigan and have for a lot of years. I've worked closely with this legislation as well with Mark Neidinger there, and also Tracy Whitaker and Brian Lindquist. And those folks are also part of the discussions with the insurance coalition as well. So there's a lot of collaborative work here for the greater good of funeral service. And, NGL was here throughout the really, I would say, dark times in our Preneed landscape here in the state of Michigan. And it's tough because I'm from the southeast side of Michigan, and Metro Detroit are an east side. And we were looking really, I looked down I-75 an hour, and Ohio is there, and they have 22 carriers available in their state.
Wow.
Right. I'm a believer that good competition just makes us all better. When our funeral home opens here, we have good competition, and that excites me. So I think, funeral homes in Michigan, us certainly, even, Precoa and their other marketing partners are 100% grateful and loyal to NGL's, their choice to stay and support funeral homes. To answer your second question, have things changed for consumers, or will they change? And I think the short answer is yes, particularly with folks that are paying over time, and to NGL's credit, they stayed. But insurance is all levers, right? And there's 100 pennies in a dollar, and there's different ways to structure Preneed products. And, some provide higher commissions with lower growth rates, and some provide low growth rates with high commission. And there's often products in between. It's often, there's a choice that the funeral homeowner can make, and the funeral professionals that are making those choices. With that, you have premiums when people pay over time. And if insurance companies here in the state of Michigan post this law being signed, or pre this law being signed, so it's under CPI, and it was very difficult, obviously, for carriers to be profitable in this state. It was very clear, right? The uncertainty of CPI, the recent drastic increase of inflation in our world. So we all work together on this, including the carriers who are also competitors. And then, yes, there's going to be changes because there's going to be, rates will go down for consumers in terms of the ones that pay over time. Each carrier is going to have their own nuances, what make them special. And there will be, I don't know if there'll be 22 carriers like Ohio, but I do know that there will be more. And we will certainly be looking at all that. And it's likely that we will be diversified as well as a group and offer multiple product lines and a product suite to always think about families, funeral homes, and ourselves last. And of course, we put ourselves in the same category with our carrier partners. So I think this is good for everybody. It raises the bar. Michigan's a big state. There's a lot of opportunity here, and I look forward to seeing good competition on the road. That's for sure.
Has there already been, is there been like a flood of people returning? What's the mechanism? Do they just have to hang out a shingle now? Do they just have to turn on a button, or do they have to reapply into the state? How does that work?
Yeah, so there's carriers that have history here. They've kept their agencies registered, and maybe there was more of a moratorium, right, on products or pausing of issuing products. So you're going to see carriers that have either departed recently or, were in the market are probably, as opposed to having to file everything new. I can't really speak for, because that's the carriers working with the agency. Right. So I really don't have, I really do think that it'll be with immediate effect of the law. I know there are a ton of calls coming into Michigan to the Department of Financial and Insurance Services. I do know that. And I would assume that the folks that had a relationship with Department of Financial Insurance Services here in Michigan, they may have an advantage there, but I really don't know, to be quite honest.
We're going to take a little break right now because I want to talk to you about American Funeral Director Magazine, the flagship of all of the things that we do here at Kates-Boylston Publications. Our company's been covering the funeral industry for almost 150 years, and American Funeral Director has led the way that entire time. It is a monthly must-read that covers the crucial topics every funeral professional should be informed about. Inside every month of American Funeral Director, you'll find our regular features such as In the Know and 5 Questions, which delve into specific topics interesting to funeral directors. We also publish news and investigative features that are written with funeral directors in mind and from the perspective of people who genuinely understand the space. We're really proud of our magazine, and we work real hard on it, and we want you to read it. And so what we're doing this month is offering a special exclusive subscription price for our listeners. You can subscribe now to American Funeral Director for $12 for your first year. That's a steal for the wealth of knowledge that you'll gain. Don't miss out on this opportunity to elevate your expertise. Get leading voices in the funeral profession right at your fingertips and right to your mailbox. To get access to this special offer, just click on the link in the show notes and it will bring you to a page where you can sign up and start getting American Funeral Director next month. Kates-Boylston Publications, your trusted partner in the funeral industry for over a century. Stay informed, stay ahead, and let us guide you on your professional journey. Subscribe today because knowledge is power and success begins with staying informed. Kates-Boylston Publications, where the past, present, and future of the funeral profession come together. Can you tell me anything specifically that you're hoping to do now that you can, that you couldn't do last year, let's say?
Well, I think that there's a couple things here. Obviously one being that Preneed insurance will be available, because at the end of this year, it wouldn't have been. I'm pretty confident of that. So I think that's segues into there's, different needs for different funeral homes. And I think that's why we exist. We try to understand that. And there's people behind this, right? It's not just a product. Right. And you have, funeral homes that rely on this for their not only operational, configuration, but there's also the people that if it's a dedicated person that's working with pre-need families and they are a fantastic addition to the staff and to the team, and maybe they meet at-need families as well, and maybe they make that house call in a jam. And these are people that you want in front of families making a difference in the community. And there are a lot of those people out there that are advanced funeral planners in Michigan that are formidable parts of their organization. And those people probably wouldn't exist after this year. So I think the biggest thing for what kept me going throughout this process is knowing that there were people's livelihoods on the line. And that was what we were looking forward to having available next year, is the people that are a big part of these funeral homes that are out serving and providing the best experience to their communities when it comes to planning ahead. And so that I'm really, really, really just, I guess, relieved that piece. What we can do this year is really focus more what we, on special projects. And I think this goes for a lot of even advanced funeral planners and owners that may have had some anxiety from this, because even though this is one state in the union, there's a lot of funeral homes here. And if every day you didn't know if you were going to have a pre-need program that was running great and it could be all coming to a screeching halt, it's nice that they can kind of refocus their brain on just continuing forward. And I'm just thrilled to be a part of that with them.
And speaking of being a part of things, you formed this Michigan Preneed Coalition. Are you keeping that open? Are you keeping your lobbyist? Do you have other things that you want to do or that you're ready to do politically for the industry or just in general?
Well, I will say that I will never run for political office. I think you heard it here first on Funeral Service Insider, the podcast. As I just briefly mentioned before, I think there is a lot of good work that can be done, even here in the state of Michigan. So I think the short answer is yes, we will keep this coalition absolutely open, and we will have an ear to the ground on legislation in our state. And there is a lot of activity in the state when it comes to legislation. So it's important that funeral home owners, at least that are even the coalition existed or had people that joined that weren't our customers and maybe never will be. And that's okay. It's just a matter of us all being on the same page of what's going on legislative in your state, because guys like myself and Gail's like category that I'm going to be 40 this year. I really don't have any plans at retirement anytime soon. So we have, let's just say, another 20 years in this profession. And I know it's going to be changing faster than ever. And I think it's important that as kind of middle of the road professionals in terms of age and even the younger folks, that we keep a close ear to the ground. And I encourage anybody listening to this that, you do the same in your state. And yes, I would say that we're going to maintain an active role in the legislative affairs here. And if there are states that would like to discuss that more on how to approach this, we would absolutely entertain that.
Very well. And that kind of brings me up toward the end. I do want to ask you, is there something I should have asked you and didn't? Is there something you thought you'd get the opportunity to say, but I didn't provide it?
I think I would just end on that. Policy isn't dead, no pun intended. And I know there are things on funeral homes and funeral directors and funeral professionals' mind, but we are very good at this business of sitting sometimes and complaining. And I say that as a fellow funeral director and somebody that has done just that. I would just encourage people to think about some of the things that you want change in your state, in your district, and you can go granular all the way down to the funeral homes that we work in. And if it makes sense and you can make a good case for that change and build support, and it ultimately ends up helping all parties involved, don't lose sight. It may not be easy, but I've learned through a lot of acquired gray hair, and that is not a joke. I mean, that is the truth. I'm glad this is a recording and not a video, because people have said, like, what the hell has happened to this kid? So I know sometimes it seems tough. I know sometimes it's hard to take these issues on, but again, I'm committed to paying it forward if someone has and wants to take on an issue in their state. And if they want help with that, we're more than willing to listen.
Very cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, sir.
Tony, thank you so much. It was great to be with you.
Funeral Service Insider, the podcast, is a Kates-Boylston production. It was written and edited by me, Tony Russo. I've said it before, and I will say it again. Make sure you check the show notes, because that's where you can get in touch with us, and that's where you can find a link to all the things we have going on at Kates-Boylston.com, as well as in American Funeral Director and American Cemetery and Cremation magazines. If you have any feedback that you'd like to leave, you can send me an email, and you can do that in the show notes, and you can also give me a phone call. You can call me at 732-746-0201 and leave me a message. If it's appropriate, I'll play it back on the show. If it's inappropriate, I will share it with my friends. This is the part where I encourage you to subscribe. Please subscribe wherever you're listening now. If you just listen on our website, that's fine, and I appreciate the listening. If you subscribe on your phone, however, then you get it. You don't have to remember to go anywhere. You can have it on the go. And this is a good commuter podcast. It's the right length of time, and it's the right length of interest, I think. It's the right intensity of interest, I guess I want to say. And now, it's time for the postmortem. As you know, as I've said before, I find a lot of the stories for the In Case You Missed It section of Funeral Service Insider, the newsletter, by just searching Google. And every day I get up and I type a bunch of different keywords into Google. I have some alerts set that are funeral home related, that are death care specific, aquamation, cremation, crematory, words like that. No matter what the word is, I have not been able to escape the outrageous, egregious breach of protocol and human decency that occurred in Colorado with the Return to Nature funeral home. The only thing that I found as a reporter about it that hasn't been reported elsewhere is that a couple of their partners split on them back in July. And I am looking into that, and that might be worth the story, but I just don't think there's anything to rehash. At some point, it's just awful. I mean, you guys are in the business. There's nothing I can tell you about this except that it's bad and it makes everybody look bad. You know, there's not any... I'm not going to do a story how to remember to cremate the bodies left in your care, right? There's no good way. There's nothing informative to say about it. If there is, I promise I'll run a feature. A couple people have asked me, why we haven't had anything. And so I felt like I wanted to at least address it. And the reason we don't have anything to say is there's not a lot worth saying about it that hasn't been said in the consumer media. So if I find something useful, I promise I will share it. In the meantime, all the rest of us can do in the industry is be upstanding and continue to serve the families in the way you guys serve them, and be the best that you can be. And you can't worry about getting this stink on you. There's nothing for it. It's an awful thing, and it happens too often. And questions about regulation are, I think, pointless. I don't think that regulations would have prevented this from happening. And frankly, I'm not telling anyone who is listening to this anything when I say that it happens more often than anyone would like. I mean, not 200, but there are regularly cases of mishandled remains, and that doesn't have to do with regulation. It has to do with just common decency. One thing I will say, although I'm sure, again, you already know it, is it's just a little reminder about how much sense it makes to go out of your way with cremation families, to show them what you're doing for their loved one, and to show them that you have completed your charge and you have done your duty as far as their loved one was concerned. But that's all I have for this time. So until next time, thanks for listening to Funeral Service Insider, the podcast.